The graves of dozens of kings from the time of King Arthur uncovered in Britain. The graves of dozens of what may have been early British kings, queens, princes, and princesses from the era of the mythical King Arthur have been revealed by a new study. It suggests that British royal graves dating from between the 5th and 7th centuries AD have been overlooked until now, possibly because they were not elaborate and contain no valuable grave goods. The research reconsiders the archaeological evidence from a little understood period of British history between the end of the Roman rule and the late Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, a time traditionally described by the legends of King Arthur. The new study by Ken Dark, an emeritus professor of archaeology and history at the University of Reading in the UK, identifies that what may be up to 65 graves of post-Roman British kings and their families at about 20 burial sites across the west of England and Wales. Reading is about an hour's very fast train ride from west of London. I know because my second son used to go to university there. So Reading, University of Reading, and 65 graves of post-Roman British kings and their families at about 20 burial sites across England, west of England and Wales, including the modern English counties of Somerset and Cornwall. The British continued to rule in what are now the west of England, Wales, and parts of Scotland in the centuries after the end of the Roman rule in Britain in the early 5th century, while the invading Anglo-Saxons settled in the east. But while Anglo-Saxon rulers of the time were given elaborate burials with valuable and ornate grave gifts, the Christian British may have viewed this as a pagan practice, Dark said. Instead, the British seem to have buried their royalty without grave goods, in simple graves without stone inscriptions alongside the graves of common Christians, although many of the royal graves were enclosed by a rectangular ditch and probably surrounded by a fence that has since rotted away, he said. Dark, who is now at the University of Navarra in Spain, is the author of the study published this month in the Journal of the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland. The royal graves are very standardized, he said. They have some variation, just like the ordinary graves do. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Some have only one grave in the center, while others have 2 or 3. Post-Roman Britain. Roman rule in Britain lasted from 43 AD, following the Roman invasion under the Emperor Claudius, until about 410 AD, when the last Roman troops were recalled to Gaul, modern France, amid internal rebellions in the Roman Empire and invasions by the Germanic tribes. The Roman general Julius Caesar invaded southern Britain in 55 BC and 54 BC, but he did not establish permanent Roman rule there. Between the 5th and 7th centuries, the Christian British, that's AD, the Christian British ruled what are now the Western England and Wales as a patchwork of small kingdoms that tried to continue Christian Roman traditions. And in the same period, pagan Germanic tribes, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, who originated in the north of Europe, invaded and settled in the eastern parts of England. The legends of King Arthur, who was supposedly British and Christian, are set in this period, although most historians think Arthur did not actually exist. Dark, however, suggests that a real person or a fictitious hero of that name was famous as early as the 6th century, because Dark's previous studies have suggested there was a sudden spike in the use of the name Arthur among British and Irish royal families at the time. Dark began his investigation to address a long-standing archaeological mystery. While many British kings were known to have lived during this period, almost none of their graves had ever been found. Until this study, the burial of only one British king from the era was known after being discovered in the northwest of Wales. An inscription on a gravestone names the person buried there as Catamanus, that is Cadnaf in Welsh, and declares that he was king, Rex in Latin. But Cadfan may have retired from the kingship to become a monk before his death, and the phrasing of the inscription implies his grave was being commemorated because of his status as a monk, Dark said. This, I have to tell you, this was a very usual thing with kings and princesses up until the end of the Byzantine era. At the end of their rule, they would become monks. They would even pay for the monastery to hold their cells. They paid in advance, and they even upgraded the monasteries before going there. So now, meanwhile, the graves of the at least 9 Anglo-Saxon rulers from the period have been found, including one at the famous ship burial at Sutton Hoo, near the east coast of England. The royal graves. To get to the bottom of the mystery, Dark reviewed the archaeological work previously done at thousands of burial sites from this period in the west of Britain and Ireland. His study suggests that the British royal graves were placed within early Christian cemeteries, and while they were marked out as those of high-status people, they seem very humble compared to ornate pagan graves, and none have stones with inscriptions stating who was buried there. The outer enclosures vary in size, and some contain up to 4 graves, but they are typically about 15 to 30 feet across and 30 feet long. Dark said, we've got a load of burials that are all the same, and a tiny minority of those burials are marked out as being of higher status than the others. When there are no other possible candidates, that seems to me to be a pretty good argument for these being the lost royal burials. At one site in Tintagel, a fortified peninsula on the coast of Cornwall that's long been associated with post-Roman British royalty, the legends of King Arthur and what are thought to be the 5 British royal graves in an early Christian cemetery take another form. Each was covered by a mound of earth, possibly because the Irish royal graves are so covered with mounds called ferta. He said the post-Roman British had strong links to Celtic or Celtic Ireland, and ancient Irish and British were both Celtic origin and had similar languages. But the pattern of placing the royal graves in the center of the enclosure, usually rectangular but sometimes circular, appeared to be as a burial style developed by the Christians in late Roman Britain, he said. The enclosure grave tradition comes straight out of the Roman burial practices, he said, and that's a good reason why we have them in Britain, but not in Ireland, because Britain was part of the Roman Empire, Ireland was not, he said. Although previous studies had noted that the enclosure's graves were thought to hold people of high social status rather than royals, the archaeologists were expecting royal burials to be covered by mounds of earth or marked with inscriptions on stone, he said. He said, but I'm suggesting that this burial practice was specifically royal. This was by Tom Metcalf, Live Science. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.